Welcome to the Mount Pleasant podcast, featuring discussions and interviews about the people, places, and events that make Mount Pleasant such a special place.
This is the Mount Pleasant podcast. I'm your host, Brian Cleary, and all thanks to the great people of Mount Pleasant Magazine, I get the honor, the privilege of introducing you to Mount Pleasant, the people who make it such a special place to do business, to work, and even to live. We're introducing you to Mount Pleasant's best on the Mount Pleasant podcast. 7 spiritual leaders from Mount Pleasant are a part of Mount Pleasant Magazine's All Walks of Faith issue. During this holiday season, we have a conversation with some of those, including Reverend Nicole Abdnour from the Mount Pleasant Presbyterian Church, Father Gregory West, he is the founder of St. Clair Assisi Church on Daniel Island, Pastor Josh Surratt of Seacoast, and also Rabbi Yossi Refson of the Center for Jewish Life. Those leaders, part of our conversation here on the Mount Pleasant podcast. On the cover of the current edition of Mount Pleasant Magazine, a really cool photo of 7 spiritual leaders from Mount Pleasant all together. Since this is where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive, we thought that we would speak with some of those 7 and get their take on what's going on in today's world. The Reverend Dr. Nicole Abdnour is the senior pastor and head of staff at the Mount Pleasant Presbyterian Church, and we welcome her. What did it mean to you, Pastor Abdnour, to be invited and to be a part of that photo with those other 6 religious leaders?
Oh, it was a great honor and privilege and a real delight to be invited to participate in that photo shoot and to meet the fellow leaders here in the community. Particularly for me, I am new to Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, and new to this particular congregation as well. My family and I moved here in mid-August in order to start school. And then I did not begin my ministry here until September 1st. So to have the opportunity to meet fellow religious leaders in the community sort of out of the gate was a real opportunity and a great joy. I thoroughly enjoyed meeting others who serve in this area.
Reverend Abdnour, people may be curious, where did you come to Mount Pleasant from?
My family moved here from Tampa, Florida, where I served as an associate pastor at Palmacia Presbyterian Church for about 18 years.
It might surprise some people that all of you come together, because I would think in some people's mind, maybe religion is somewhat of a competition. You know, we all want to get that person into our congregation, but obviously that's not the case. You guys coming together, is that something that regularly happens?
It's been my experience in other places where I've lived that it does happen. And it's something that I hope happens here in Mount Pleasant. Generosity begets generosity. And I think we are all better when we are working together, when we all have a relationship and recognize that we each bring something different and unique to the community. And it is something that the community needs.
Reverend Abdnour, who or maybe what was it that inspired your own personal spiritual journey?
Again, to say the word community, it was the community that raised me. It was the faith community that I grew up in, that encouraged me and that I saw real power in terms of coming together. And then the Holy Spirit, I think, had something to do with it.
I would have to think that would definitely be part of it. In terms of what you're doing now, what do you think is the most rewarding part of the job you have?
Getting to know people, particularly being invited into people's lives, oftentimes at some of their most vulnerable points, is a real honor. It's a real privilege to be able to walk with people in times of change and transition and crisis. It's not something that I take for granted ever, and it's a real privilege.
In that photo, you were there with a person from the Church of Latter-day Saints and a rabbi. And so we're in the holiday season, and even inside Christianity, Christmas is celebrated the same, but there are unique things. Is there something different that people should be aware of in terms of how you and how a Presbyterian celebration may differ from Catholic or something else?
I think that, we're in this season of Advent right now, preparing for Christmas. We are watching and we are waiting, and we're doing that work collectively and together as we prepare for the light to enter the world once again. And we look for ways to be that light in the world, I think. And that's something that I think that we share in common with many others, but we might have our particular nuances and bents. It's a time and a season where in the Presbyterian Church, like other faith communities, I think we gather a little more regularly for worship opportunities and for learning opportunities, as well as for fellowship opportunities. And so we're all seeking to kind of navigate and to find our way to be together.
Well, let me just follow up on that 1 second, because some people are in religion, they go to church only at certain times of the year. And Christmas is one of them. I'm sure you would encourage that, but then is there maybe then the next step to maybe becoming a more regular member of the congregation?
I think whatever brings people into the into a community of faith and into worship is good and is positive. It is, of course, our desire and our belief that the faith community has something to offer to people. It nurtures us. It helps sustain us in our everyday lives. And so the more that we're present and participate and actively engaged, I think the more prepared we are for whatever life may deal us, whatever might come our way. So we certainly, this is a season where we do see an increase in visitors and those who would consider themselves to be members, but perhaps that we haven't seen in a little while. And it's a big homecoming, and we're grateful for their presence and whatever brings them. And we hope that they do keep coming.
So Reverend Abdnour at the Mount Pleasant Presbyterian Church, can you fill me in? When is it that you do hold Mass?
We hold worship services every Sunday morning. We have 2 worship services. One takes place at 8:30 and the other at 11 a.m. And next week, as we enter closer to the Christmas season and the celebration of Christmas Eve, we'll be holding on December the 18th a Blue Christmas service, which is a special service on a Wednesday evening where folks who are grieving, particularly who might find some difficulties in this season, it's often the season of great joy and rejoicing and happiness and frivolity, and all that's good and well. But many people in our community carry some heaviness and some grief and some pain into this season. So it's a special service kind of outside of our Sunday morning worship services that allow people to enter into the space and the season a little bit differently. And then, of course, on Christmas Eve, it's our big worship season, and we have multiple worship services. And again, being new to town, I should have written that down so I could rattle off those times. But I fear that if I were to rattle off those times to you right now, I would give you times that are lodged in the recesses of my brain from a past life and a past place.
Well, Reverend, let's just put it this way then. At Mount Pleasant Presbyterian Church, when you're having Mass, the doors are open and all are welcome.
Anytime we gather for worship, the doors are open and all are welcome indeed.
The Mount Pleasant podcast is where the pages of Mount Pleasant magazine come alive, and I'm Brian Cleary. And if you pick up the most recent issue of Mount Pleasant magazine, you'll see an amazing cover photo of 7 spiritual leaders from Mount Pleasant, including one that's joining us now. Father Gregory West, he is the pastor of the Church of St. Clare of Assisi Catholic Church in Mount Pleasant. Father, thanks so much for joining us. When you were invited to be a part of this photo shoot and join those other spiritual leaders, a compliment? How did that go down, and how did that make you feel?
Well, I was very honored to be asked to be a part of it. It's great to see so many different faith expressions represented over here in the East Cooper area. So it's been my delight to be able to be a part of it.
So we take you back 10 years now. You founded the church in 2014. What was the inspiration for you to start that church?
The inspiration was my bishop telling me I was going to do it. In the Catholic world, it's a little bit like the military. We are assigned to our various posts. I was at the upstate of South Carolina running another parish, and there had been a long-term plan to hopefully build a parish here on Daniel Island once the population of Daniel Island would be substantial enough to justify the opening of a parish. So I came home in 2014, got started with 200 people using the auditorium at Bishop England High School across the street from where our church currently is located.
Father, you say you came down from the upstate. Are you originally from South Carolina, or where do your roots come from?
I'm born and raised on Sullivan's Island, 5 generations of my family on the island. Both of my grandfathers were military officers at Fort Moultrie. My family's been in the Charleston area for many generations.
Well, being a Catholic myself, Father, I understand the bishop, and I understand you've got military background in your family as well, so that all comes in. Tell me a little bit about, in terms of the Mount Pleasant, Daniel Island community. Let's focus on Daniel Island since that's where the church is. What do you think it is that's special about that Daniel Island community?
My undergraduate degree happens to be in urban planning. So being a part of the Daniel Island project, if you will, this planned community, from it being nothing but farmland from what I remember as a child, to having our portion of the community be so integral to the life and the vitality of not only Daniel Island but beyond. It's been very exciting to watch and be a part of. It's a beautiful place to live over here. There are people just like you, me, everybody else. It's a very special community, people moving in from all over the country and even beyond. So, my being a local helps to orient them, if you will, to life in the Lowcountry as they adopt the Lowcountry lifestyle and hopefully slow down a little bit and enjoy this beautiful place we all call home.
Father West, can you share with me some of the qualities that would make someone a good spiritual leader?
Obviously, the element of faith is there, to look beyond the current, the visible, and to know that there's an entire existence that maybe the human, tactile experience cannot understand, or rather cannot, sense, but an existence beyond existence itself. Naturally, we call that God. So faith in seeing more than meets the eye, and then as well as being able to convey what that means to day-to-day living. And a big portion of that, of course, is the ability to listen attentively, to accompany people. As Pope Francis has been teaching the church, we need to shepherd and accompany in people's walks in their own lives. And, from our own religious standpoint, to provide those avenues and means to help them to grow in personal holiness, to help them deal with the struggles of daily life.
Father West, obviously you've got a background and a lot of experience in terms of what you've been doing with the church and with the Catholic Church. As you look at the young people today, and there seems to be at least a segment of them moving away from the church, but do you see some people coming to the church, and are you feeling good about what the future is?
Absolutely, because the pendulum is swinging in many different places. We started off with 200 people. We're now 3,400 people in the course of 10 years. And believe it or not, our membership, 25% of our membership, so roughly 850 people currently, are under the age of 18. So this is a very, very young community, kids all over the place, a dynamic youth ministry program, education program. But it's interesting to see how people are being attracted, in our situation, to Catholicism. Maybe they've come from some other background or no background, but there's just something about the 2,000-year history of the Catholic Church and its reach all throughout civilization that they are curious about. So right now we've got about 25, 30 people going through the preparation process of being received into the Catholic Church.
That's amazing growth. 10 years, 200 parishioners to 3,000. Can you attribute certain things to that? What would you give credit for, besides, of course, yourself, moving forward and having that amazing growth at the church?
Well, we all know what's happened to the Charleston area, the explosive growth, and people are moving here. It's no big secret. So our growth is largely attributed to the migration of people from what I call the cold states and other places. COVID unleashed a lot of people to be able to live in new places because of distance working. But we've also just, seen a lot of people who have been in the Charleston area for a long time, and particularly Catholics, and they love what it is we do here. We're very traditional, very, we enjoy so many of the beautiful expressions of our Catholic faith throughout the centuries. So it's a little bit of both and, but largely it's attributed to the people who migrated to the Charleston area.
We got together with the spiritual leaders that we see on the cover of Mount Pleasant magazine. As we go into the holiday season, each denomination maybe celebrates Christmas a little differently. What do you think the message is that the Catholic Church sends on this special Christmas season?
It's always got to be hope. Hope was the driving force for the Jewish people for centuries, hoping that a Messiah would come into their midst. And for us as Christians, of course, we know that that has happened 2,000 years ago in a sleepy little place called Bethlehem. And everyone's hopes were suddenly realized, but not everybody recognized it. So our work in all of our churches and all of our faith communities is to provide, those levels of hope. The world is always going to be dark in some way or fashion. Humans get in the way of things. Humans do wonderful things. But to be able to see through the moment and know that God is on the horizon, God is near, God is present, and God is that abiding force of good and beauty and truth and compassion. It just helps every individual, every family, every marriage, every relationship to really kind of be catapulted forward, if you will, beyond the ordinary into the extraordinary, which for us, of course, is the presence of God himself.
Father West, when do you have services at the Church of St. Clare of Assisi Catholic Church? We
are here on Saturday at 5 p.m., the Vigil, which is anticipating the new day of Sunday, the Lord's Day. So on Sunday morning, we have masses at 9 and 11 a.m. And then every day, Monday through Thursday at 8 a.m. And then on the first Friday of each month, also at 8 a.m. And then on Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. as well. Those are our celebrations of the masses. And we do many other things besides that throughout the course of the week.
And I would assume, Father West, I think it's a good assumption that your doors are open to everyone.
Doors are open to everyone. In fact, the church is open every day, all day. We unlock the doors at 7 o'clock in the morning on weekdays, 8 o'clock on the weekends, and the church is open until 6 p.m. People are welcome to come visit. We've built, by the grace of God, a beautiful church building that's received national and regional awards. So whether people are Catholic, Christian, none of the above, we welcome everybody to come and spend some time in this extraordinarily beautiful house of God that's inspiring and just awe-inspiring, certainly is.
Mount Pleasant Magazine has the words and the photos. The Mount Pleasant podcast is where you hear directly from people profiled, including a person that we have today. Josh Surratt is the lead pastor of Seacoast in Mount Pleasant. And on the cover of the most recent Mount Pleasant Magazine, you see 7 spiritual leaders from across the Mount Pleasant area. And Josh is one of them. Josh, what did it mean for you to be included in that group? And how did that group get along?
Well, it was an honor. We have a great faith community here in the Mount Pleasant area. So certainly anytime we are allowed to be a part of that or recognized for it, we're grateful. And, the fights were pretty minimal. No, I'm just kidding. We had a great time. And obviously across that spectrum, we come from different perspectives in our faith. But I think there's a ton of mutual respect and admiration for what each of us do in the community.
Well, I think some people may have the impression that there is competition, if that's the right word, among the religions. Is it a usual practice? Do you normally get together with the folks from other faiths in the Low Country just to talk about things?
Yeah. In fact, this morning we had a pastor from a church here in Mount Pleasant come over and do a little deal on Advent for our staff because we acknowledge that he's got a unique perspective on that. And I think... listen, we all have a human nature, and I think that competition is something that probably everybody struggles with to some degree or another. But I would think if there's any industry that we should be able to all work together on the same team, it should be in the faith community. And I think for the most part, we do a pretty good job of that.
Is there something that you can share that maybe you learned as part of getting together with these other 6 spiritual leaders? Or is there something that maybe you can pass along to me that I should learn in terms of when religions come together?
Yeah, I think one thing that was interesting to me is meeting and connecting with the rabbi on how long they've been here. And he immediately was like, hey, tell your dad. I said, hey, he was a huge part of our grand opening for the building that we did. And I think I learned walking into that meeting. I've been leading Seacoast for 10 years now, so I've been around for a good while. But there's a whole lot of history and foundation and faith that's been going on for generations prior, and we get to build on that. One of the guys that was there was Bishop Steve Wood, and Steve was just recently named the Archbishop of the Anglican Church of North America, and we ended up being able to host his sort of swearing in ceremony. I forget what they call it, investiture, at Seacoast not long ago. And so there's just good relationships. And I think that when you're in the same room together, you see a lot more where you're aligned than you do focus on where you may have differences and how you practice different things. And so we've got great leaders. I think that would be a big takeaway too. Just we've got some quality men and women in Mount Pleasant, and I'm grateful to be able to rub shoulders with them and learn from them.
So in that photo shoot, when you read the article in Mount Pleasant magazine, you talk with a rabbi, someone from the Catholic Church, someone from the Presbyterian Church. For people who aren't sure, quote unquote, what Seacoast is, you guys have been around, what now, 36 years, started by your father. How is it that from a religious standpoint, you describe what Seacoast is and what you guys do?
Yeah, well, we actually grew up, I'm a fourth generation pastor. So my great grandfather was a pastor, and they were actually in the Assemblies of God denomination, which is one of the Christian denominations started 100 or so years ago. And when we moved to Charleston, my dad had a vision. He really wanted to start a church that was focused on people who didn't go to church. You know, we moved to the Holy City. We moved from the north. Obviously, the city has a great spiritual heritage, but we knew that there was still a large number of people, a large percentage of people in the Charleston area that didn't have a faith background, or maybe for some reason, something happened along the way. They quit going to church. And so I think that when we started, our vision was we really do want to be a place where people that maybe don't speak the language or don't know, the rituals. And again, we love all the rituals, but that they'd feel comfortable in a place like Seacoast. So that was our beginning. And I would say to a large degree, we still practice that way today. In fact, the series that we're doing right now on the weekends is called At the Movies. And people are like, whoa, what is that? And we're actually taking four Christmas movies during this month and taking clips of them and really trying to point to what is the biblical truth that this story resonated so much in our culture. What is the biblical truth that resonates, and tie it into to Scripture. And so, yeah, that's probably a little different approach than what some churches may take. But again, our primary goal is to bring people in the doors that maybe don't have a faith background and try to reach them with the message of Jesus in a way that they're going to understand and be able to connect to.
I think by our conversation today, I can answer for you who was responsible for your spiritual journey. Was there something else other than your dad that took you down this path?
You know, when I grew up, I did not want to be in ministry at all. In fact, my friends would joke with me about it, like, hey, you can be a pastor like your dad. And here's what I'll say is being a rebellious teenager in the 90s in a smaller community in Mount Pleasant, when your dad's the pastor of a rapidly growing mega church, you can't get away with anything in this town. I can tell you that right now. But when I was 18 years old, I went to college at Charleston, moved out of the house at 17, and really just radically committed my life to Christ after a semester or two of trying to find my own way in college. And so when that happened, really just Jesus, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of influences in my life, but really looking at the way that Jesus lived his life, the way that he acted towards people really just resonated with me. So I went into the restaurant industry and really loved that and tried to do my best to reach people and connect with people with faith there. And honestly, in terms of the role that I'm in right now, when the team came to me about 15, 16 years ago and said, hey, we think that you should be the next leader of Seacoast and let's explore that path, my first response to them was, what in the world is wrong with you people? This is a great church. I love this church. It's changed my family. Don't ruin it by putting me in charge of it. I would follow 10 leaders on the staff. And I really meant that. And I still do to this day. And I think I believe and understand now in hindsight that I probably was the right person for this season to steward it, but never thought I'd be doing this. Never really even aspired to it. It just ended up being like kind of one step at a time, took this journey.
Well, I hope now that you're 10 years in, you're feeling a little more confident in your role, and that seems to be the case and come across. So if somebody wants to visit Seacoast, when do you hold services?
We have services, 3 of them on Sunday mornings here in Mount Pleasant. We meet at 8 a.m., then again at 9:30, and then our last service is at 11 o'clock. So service is about an hour long. And so you can come in and dress how you're comfortable. That's the thing that's unique about Seacoast is you'll see maybe some people dressed up in suits, but then a lot of people that are just kind of dress down and come in as they feel comfortable. But we'd love to see anybody who may be interested to come check it out. We'd be glad to welcome you in.
Seacoast is also a huge part of the community. You certainly do a lot to help those in the Low Country in need. Seems to me it's safe to say that the doors are pretty much always open to everyone at Seacoast.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, our Mount Pleasant campus here, I got a report a few weeks ago, and in the year 2024, we will have ended up hosting over 5,000 events that are not Seacoast events, just in our church in different rooms and buildings. And so, yeah, we love to host graduations for high schools and middle schools and, various events. But we definitely feel like come as you are, and everybody is definitely welcome here.
Flip-flops and shorts, the Low Country uniform, welcome at Seacoast.
That's right. It's funny, when we built this building that we're in, the architect firm came back with initial drawings, and they had like all kinds of formal stuff about the building and formal cars in the parking lots and their drawings. And we kind of told them, hey, we're the beach, man, like chill out. And so the next drawing, they had a bunch of those woodies with surfboards on them in the parking lot. I'm like, that feels more like us. That's great.
Well, Josh, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. This has been great. And you talk about all the events, early voting even at Seacoast Church. I mean, come on.
We did it. And the cafe's open, by the way, every weekday, Monday through Thursday. I think about 7 a.m. it opens up. So a secret that most people don't know is we serve some pretty great coffee and lunch here too during the week.
All Walks of Faith, that's a feature and a cover photo shoot on the latest edition of Mount Pleasant Magazine. This, of course, is the Mount Pleasant Podcast with me, Brian Cleary, where the pages of Mount Pleasant Magazine come alive. 7 spiritual leaders from Mount Pleasant were featured in that shoot, and one of them joins us today. He is Rabbi Yossi Refson. Am I getting that right, Rabbi?
Pretty close. Yossi Refson, yes.
And you are with the Center for Jewish Life, and that is the beautiful building there on Mathis Ferry Road. It is Chabad of Charleston. And let's talk a little bit about you getting together with those other spiritual leaders, Rabbi. What did that mean for you to be able to come together with other people from other faiths and discuss everything that's going on in our world today?
It's always special to get together with other clergy people. But it's really wonderful to be included in a photo shoot like that, especially coming from a minority faith. Being included in a front cover story always shows really how special Mount Pleasant is, where everyone is respected regardless of whether from majority or minority faith, where everyone is considered important, which is heartwarming.
Rabbi, I think there's a feeling among some people that the religions may be in somewhat of a competition. Is it not unusual for you to get together with other spiritual leaders to talk about whatever the day may bring?
It's very common. I have lots of friends who are pastors in different churches. That's one of the special things about Charleston. I really don't think that clergy, we're in competition with each other. We're all battling the same thing, which is people just not being involved in faith, just people who don't care. And that's really what's the most important thing. We battle people that are not interested in faith, that don't have the time for it. And we all have the same struggle, how to make it relevant in people's lives.
Rabbi Refson, when you get together with those people, that's got to be a special thing. But let's go back a little bit, if you don't mind. Your spiritual journey yourself, was there an individual or an event or something that happened that kind of led you on the spiritual journey that you've taken?
Well, my story is quite boring. My father was a rabbi, and I grew up watching the joy that he got from that. So I didn't know anything else. So because I saw how meaningful his life was, together with my mother, as servants of the community, it was something that I always wanted to do. I couldn't see myself doing anything else.
Now, Rabbi, are you originally from South Carolina, the Mount Pleasant area? Have you traveled?
I'm originally from England, and we moved here about 18 years ago. And so for Mount Pleasant, that's a pretty long time, but for Charleston, that's just a drop in the bucket.
That's right. You and me got here about the same time. One thing that you and I can always share, we'll never be locals.
Yes, we're a come ya.
But we're happy to be here, and you've got a lot going on, obviously. And let's talk about this, if you wouldn't mind, for a little bit. It's the holiday season. This is an important time of year for all faiths. Christianity, of course, celebrates Christmas. The Jewish faith, you celebrate Hanukkah. I'm not certain that everyone knows or understands Hanukkah. Can you give me a little tutorial so I can be more up to speed on what Hanukkah is for the Jewish faith?
So briefly, Hanukkah represents the historical story when the second century, when the Jews were battling the Greeks. Jerusalem was under Greek rule, and the Jews wanted to practice Jewish faith, which was banned at the time, and they wanted to celebrate Judaism in the temple, which was lying dormant. And there was a revolt, and the Jews were able to reestablish some Jewish sovereignty over Jerusalem, and they were able to practice their faith. So in a way, Hanukkah, it's a festival which celebrates religious freedom. It's being able to practice our faith wherever we are, regardless of where we are. And in a way, what's special about Hanukkah is that if Hanukkah wouldn't have succeeded, Christianity and Islam wouldn't have come forth either. So even though it's specifically a Jewish holiday, but if we look at the deeper story behind Hanukkah, it really affects all monotheistic faiths.
Is there an easy explanation? Because Christmas is always December 25th. Hanukkah this year, December 25th, but the dates move. Is there an easy explanation for why Hanukkah isn't always on one specific day?
There is not an easy explanation.
Okay.
But the explanation is that there is the Hebrew calendar is a complicated blend of the solar and the lunar calendar. And therefore, the Hanukkah goes according to the Hebrew date of the 25th of Kislev, and which is a Hebrew date, and that doesn't align with the solar calendar, with the lunar calendar.
Rabbi Refson, can you share with me one of the most, or what you feel maybe is one of the more rewarding parts of your job as a rabbi?
Being a rabbi is so special because we are able to have a very large family. Usually people when you have, our family is always the most special part of our life. Those moments that we spend with family, the interactions that we have with family are really the greatest piece of our life. And as a rabbi, I feel that everyone who we come in contact with is really part of our family. We've been included in their family. So to have this massive extended family is like living in a family reunion the entire year, which really makes it very special.
Rabbi, as we are in this holy time, there's some turmoil in parts of the world, a lot going on. As you speak, with the Jewish members of your faith, is there a message that you could share a little bit with not only the Jewish people, but everybody who may be listening and watching our podcast? What's your hope? What's your thought as we go into the holiday season and another new year?
I just came back from Israel this morning. So I got off the plane about 10 o'clock this morning. And I think we have to look beyond the news and beyond necessarily what we read in the newspaper. There is a lot of wonderful things happening in this world. There is much more unity than division than we really think. And there is much more good. And the problem is we focus on the negative, on the negativity and on the terrible things. If it bleeds, it reads, which is part of the problem. And if we just go past the negativity and we focus on what's positive and we try and elevate the wonderful things that are out there, we will be much happier and those around us will be much happier.
Rabbi, if I was talking to a Catholic priest, I'd say, when do you have Mass? Depending on the religion, it's called something else. I'm not certain what it is in the Jewish faith, but how often and when are your doors open there at Chabad of Charleston?
Our doors are open all the time, but Judaism is unique. Judaism is not a faith which is practiced in a synagogue. Judaism isn't practiced in a temple. Judaism, there is this somewhat facetious saying that a synagogue or a temple, that's where God gets locked in. It's the jail of God. But what does that really mean? That means that Judaism is practiced every moment of our life. It's a religion which is practiced in our home. Our home is our temple. And yes, we do have services and we have other things that we can go to, but Judaism is not about what we do on a Saturday morning or Saturday night or on a holiday or on a Hanukkah. Judaism is how we live our life every single day, every single moment of our life.
And Rabbi, I have to think that your doors are open, not just to those in the Jewish faith, but to everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Just some amazing conversations with some spiritual leaders from all religions, all parts of Mount Pleasant. It's a follow-up to the All Walks of Faith feature in the Mount Pleasant magazine. I'm Brian Cleary. Thanks for joining us and sharing these conversations here on the Mount Pleasant Podcast.
Thanks for spending your time with the Mount Pleasant Podcast, your community, your podcast. Listen to past and future episodes at mountpleasantpodcast.com.